بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على عبد الله ورسوله نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So tonight is our class Friday night reflections, where we take a different topic every class and we sort of study it. We've just finished a big series that we did on the topic of the signs of the Day of Judgment. And today I wanted to do something a little bit lighter, a little bit easier inshallah, but also something that inshallah will be very beneficial and maybe will open kind of a door to you to think about. Maybe it's something you haven't thought about before. The topic that we're going to deal with today is the topic of the advice of the scholars. And we know that Allah Azza wa Jal commanded every Muslim and made a right over every Muslim to advise his brothers and sisters in Islam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. By time indeed mankind is at loss except those who believe and do good deeds and advise one another. وَتَوَاصَوْا. There is this tawasi, the wasiyah, the advice to each other with the truth, and they advise each other with patience. Taking on board this command from Allah Azza wa Jal, the scholars of Islam wrote had many examples where they gave advice to their students, and some examples where they wrote general advice to the Muslims. The Prophet ﷺ said, Ad-Deen al-Nasiha, this religion is giving advice. قالوا لمن يا رسول الله, they said, to who, O Messenger of Allah? And the Prophet ﷺ said, Lillahi, to Allah, وَلِكِتَابِهِ, and to the Quran, وَلِرَسُولِهِ, and to his messenger, and to وَلِأَئِمَّةِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ وَعَمَّتِهِمْ, and to the leaders of the Muslims and the general folk. So based upon this, scholars, there are many examples of advice. And there's some beautiful sort of words that you can just take. They're very short, like one sentence or two sentences, and you can take them on board and you can take a lot of benefit from them. Some of them are examples of one of the scholars advising one of his students, like on a one-to-one basis. And some of them are examples of the scholars advising many of the people, like for example advising the Ummah, writing a letter of advice to the general Muslims, to the Ummah. I'm not going to go in any particular order here. I'm just going to pick, and I'm not going to read the whole thing because in some of them the advice is very long. Sometimes it can be 3 or 4 pages. But I just want to pick out elements today, like just little things we can take home and we can implement for ourselves and our families. So the first one I'm going to start with is the advice of Sufyan ibn Uyayna. Sufyan ibn Uyayna was one of the great imams of Islam, one of the great ulama of hadith, one of the great ruwat, yani the narrators of hadith. You'll find him in many of the narrations of hadith in Bukhari and Muslim, in the books of hadith. You find many times Sufyan ibn Uyayna, rahimahullah. And he has this really small quote. It's really beautiful. He said, كان العلماء فيما مضى يكتب بعضهم إلى بعض هؤلاء الكلمات. He said the scholars of old in the past used to write these words of advice to each other. So this is not Sufyan ibn Uyayna's advice. This is something that Sufyan ibn Uyayna rahimahullah, took from the scholars of the past. And they used to write these words of advice to each other when they were advising each other. Just a few short sentences, but it's very beautiful. مَنْ أَصْلَحَ سَرِيرَتَهُ أَصْلَحَ اللَّهُ عَلَانِيَتَهُ. Whoever corrects their private life or their inner self, Allah corrects their public life or their outer self. Let's think about this, how beautiful this is. Whoever corrects their sarira. The sarira is what only you and Allah know. Yani it's like, it's what's private to you. You know, it comes from the word sir, the secret. Yani the secrets you have, your secret self, your secret inside, what you do in private, what you do when nobody else knows. Whoever corrects this, Allah will correct what is showed to the people, what is displayed to the people. Wallahi, I think just this one sentence, there's more, but just this one sentence, if you think about how, these words are worthy of being written in golden ink, like the scholars say. يُكْتَبُ بِمَاءِ الذَّهَبِ. It's worth writing in golden ink. If you can fix what is private between you and Allah, what is nobody else knows about, it's your private, the behavior you do when you're in private, the behavior you do when you are away from the eyes of the people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will correct for you your sort of public face, what you show to the people and what people know of you and your reputation and how people think of you. If you correct what you do in secret, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will correct what you do in public. And this is the opposite of the munafiqeen. Because what is the status of the munafiqeen? They do different things in private to what they do in public, and they try to show in public a good face, but in private they have the worst of intentions. So the believer is the opposite. We don't worry about our reputation in front of the people and our behavior in front of the people. But we worry about our sarira, what is between us and Allah, our private feelings, our private emotions. And when you think that Allah can see what is in your heart, Allah knows what is in your heart. Allah knows what your soul whispers to you. مَا تُوَسْوِسُ بِهِ نَفْسُ. The thing that your soul whispers to you, Allah knows it. If you can correct that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take care of your reputation and how people see you and how people think of you and how you appear to people. You don't work on what's between you and the people, you work on what's between you and Allah. So this is the first point. The second thing he said, وَمَنْ أَصْلَحَ مَا بَيْنَهُ وَبَيْنَ اللَّهِ أَصْلَحَ اللَّهُ مَا بَيْنَهُ وَبَيْنَ النَّاسِ. And whoever corrects what is between him and Allah, Allah will correct what is between him and the people. You have a bad relationship with your parents, with your children, with your siblings, with your relatives, with your friends, with your co-workers. The answer to getting that relationship fixed is to fix what is between you and Allah. And Allah will fix what is between you and what is between the other people. And again, it comes back to this notion of ikhlas, of doing things for Allah. But it also teaches us a principle. بمفهوم مخالفة, by the reverse understanding, it teaches us a principle. And that principle is that if your relationship with Allah is broken, your relationship with everybody else, you should expect it to be broken. And if your relationship between you and Allah is good, then inshaAllah your relationship between you and other people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make it good. So when you have issues with people, sometimes the answer is not just to work on fixing those issues, although that's a part of it, al-islah, fixing what is between people, but also fixing what is between you and Allah. How many people came to me and said to me to help them with their children, that there are issues with their kids, help me, we have some problems, relationship issues. Wallah, we say to them, that's Sometimes the answer before everything else is to fix what is between you and Allah. And if you fix what is between you and Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will fix what is between you and what is between other people. And that each of these points has ample evidence in the hadith. For example, in the hadith we mentioned recently, we've mentioned it a few times. The hadith of the one who Allah loves. If Allah loves a person, إِذَا أَحَبَّ اللَّهُ عَبْدًا نَادَى جِبْرِيلٌ. Allah calls Jibreel. Indeed, I love this person, so you should love them. And then Jibreel calls to the people in the heavens that Allah loves this person, so you should love them. So Jibreel loves him and the people in the heavens love him. Then the hadith says, ثُمَّ يُوضَعُ لَهُ الْقَبُولُ فِي الْأَرْضِ. Then acceptance is put for him on the earth, and his relationships with people on the earth become good. And he becomes a person whose speech is accepted and whose advice is taken. Because his relationship with Allah was good. And the third person, وَمَنْ عَمِلَ لِآخِرَتِهِ كَفَاهُ اللَّهُ أَمْرَ دُنْيَاهِ. And whoever works for his akhirah, Allah will take care of his dunya. Wallahi, sometimes we spend our lives working for the dunya, wallahi. And running behind every opportunity to get an increase in wealth or something for our lives, our children, our families. And sometimes we don't realize that if we worked and gave our full attention for the akhirah, Allah would take care of the dunya for us. Now that's not to say that we ignore the dunya. None of this statement of Sufyan ibn Uyayna is intended for you to ignore the dunya and the asbab. But don't give it more importance than it's worth. Work for your akhirah and Allah will take care of your dunya. Do you have financial issues? Yeah, for sure you're going to try and get, improve the job prospects, whatever. But one of the major things you have to do is to spend your time worshipping Allah Azza wa Jal. And if you worship Allah as He deserves to be worshipped, Allah will take care of your dunya. It's like Allah has everything in the heavens and the earth. So for Allah Azza wa Jal to give you everything you need and 10 times more is not difficult for Him. It's not difficult for Him at all. It doesn't take anything away from Allah. To give you millions upon millions upon millions, it doesn't even take away from what Allah has, like a drop in the ocean. It's nothing for Allah. So you work on worshipping Allah and Allah will take care of your dunya. And one of the beautiful examples of that are the ulama. Generally, not I'm saying, but many a times you see these mashayikh and ulama, scholars of Islam. You think, how does this person live? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just keeps on giving them rizq, and they keep on teaching the people and benefiting the people and studying and learning. And subhanAllah, Allah Azza wa Jal takes care of their rizq. And then you see one person miskeen, he's running after every opportunity and he's still in poverty. And he's running left and right trying to get, one job and the other, and maybe he's compromising on his deen just to get something. I just need to get this. If I get this, then everything will be fine. And you see, he doesn't get the dunya and he doesn't get the akhirah. If you want the dunya and the akhirah, put your focus on the akhirah. Now that doesn't mean you don't work for the dunya. No, you work for it. But put your focus on the akhirah, your attention, your energy on the akhirah, and work for the dunya what you can. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take care of your dunya. And this is mentioned in a hadith. حسنه بعض العلماء. Some of the scholars said it's a hadith which is hasan. من جعل الهموم هما واحدا هم آخرته كفاه الله هم دنياه وأخرى. Whoever makes his concern a single concern, the concern of the hereafter, Allah will take care of his concerns in the dunya and the hereafter. The dunya, the grave, the day of judgment, all of it Allah will take care of. As long as your worry, the thing that keeps you up at night, the thing that makes you worried is the deen, Allah will take care of your dunya and your deen. وَمَنْ تَشَعَّبَتْ بِهِ الْهُمُومِ فِي أُمُورِ الدُّنْيَا. And whoever lets his concerns be all about the dunya, in all the different things of the dunya, my children, my wealth, my life, my debt, my job, my family, لَمْ يُبَالِ اللَّهُ فِي أَيِّ أَوْدِيَتِهَا هَلَكَ. Allah does not care which valley you die in. Meaning Allah doesn't care if your family destroy you, or your children destroy you, or your wealth destroys you, or your job destroys you, or your relatives destroy you. Allah doesn't care. Because you didn't care about the akhirah, so Allah doesn't care which of the things in the dunya will kill you, ultimately. This is a very, very powerful statement. And even if this hadith, some of the ulama doubted about, some of them said it's hasan, some of them said it's weak. But it has evidence in what the scholars used to advise each other with this point. Work for your akhirah, Allah will take care of your dunya. Compromise your akhirah and run about for the dunya, and Allah will give you none of them. La dunya wa la akhirah. No dunya and no akhirah. 3 points. Sufyan ibn Uyayna said, the scholars used to advise one another, whoever corrects himself on the inside, secret self, Allah will correct his public self. Whoever corrects what's between him and Allah, Allah will correct what is between him and the people. And whoever works for his hereafter, Allah will take care of everything he needs in the dunya. So this is just one little example, is one of the pieces of advice that I had written down and I wanted to share with you. There's actually a very nice book. It's one of the books available in English, which I'm going to quote extensively from now. So it might be a nice book to read after this class. The title in Arabic is Min Wasaya Salaf. I think it's translated. The title in English is Words of Advice from the Salaf, and the early generations, the scholars. Words of Advice from the Salaf by Sheikh Salim Al-Hilali. Actually, the Sheikh himself didn't write any of this. He compiled advice that is found in Bukhari and Muslim and Ad-Darimi and all these different places, and he just put it in one book. So the first advice that he mentions in this is the advice of Ali ibn Abi Talib to Kumail ibn Ziyad. And the story is that Ali ibn Abi Talib took Kumail ibn Ziyad by the hand and led him to this, sort of raised, sort of flat plain. But again, I'm not going to quote the whole thing, but there's just a part of it that I want to quote for you. Ali ibn Abi Talib radiyallahu anhu, he said, "An-nasu thalatha." There are 3 types of people. فَعَالِمٌ رَبَّانِي وَمُتَعَلِّمٌ عَلَى سَبِيلِ نَجَاهٍ وَهَمَجٌ رَعَاءٌ أَتْبَاعُ كُلِّ نَائِقٍ يَمِيلُونَ مَعَ كُلِّ رِيحٍ. He said there are 3 types of people. There is a alim Rabbani. What is a alim Rabbani? Now, this is a beautiful word, and think about it, because it's not. He didn't say there are 3 types of people: a scholar, a student, and everybody else. He said there are 3 types of people. Alimun Rabbani, a scholar who nurtures his students. An alim Rabbani, a scholar who benefits his students. He nurtures them. And some of the scholars said, if you want a definition of what is a alim Rabbani, it is الذي يربي تلاميذه على صغار العلم قبل كباره. The one who educates his students about simple things before difficult things. He takes his students step by step. He gives them the basics, and then he gets the next level and the next level, like as if he's taking care of a plant, or he planted a seed and he waters it, and it gets a little bit taller, and each time he's feeding it, looking after it, watering it, moving it into the sun, putting it into the shade. He's really giving attention to this. That is the example of the alim Rabbani, the scholar who is nurturing and educating his students. You see that scholar, those students are not just, like random people for him. Each one of them, he takes them by the hand and he brings them until they reach his level. Until they become ulama, Rabbaniyin. They become nurturing scholars themselves. He takes them by the hand and he keeps on giving them what they need. He doesn't give them too much so they become confused. He doesn't give them the complicated things. He doesn't give them the ikhtilaf, the differences among the scholars. Before he gives them the simple, the simple rules of Islam, the simple practice of Islam. He takes them like this, step by step. So the first person of the three types of people that Ali ibn Abi Talib mentioned is the alim Rabbani, the nurturing scholar, the scholar who is not just a scholar, because an alim is somebody of knowledge. There are many people of knowledge, but a person who nurtures his students and really, takes each one of them by the hand until he makes them like him or better than him. وَمُتَعَلِّمٌ عَلَى سَبِيلِ نَجَاهٍ, or someone who is studying upon the path of salvation. Two things here. The virtue of the one who is studying. Now, many of us say about, we talk about being scholars and people being scholars. But wallahi, that's not the important thing. The important thing, as you're going to hear from the advice of Ali ibn Abi Talib, if you're not a scholar, you have to be a student. Because those who are neither scholars nor students, there is no khair in them whatsoever. As Ali ibn Abi Talib is going to tell you. Either you're a scholar, either you're a student, or either you are nothing. Look at how Ali ibn Abi Talib divides the people. You're a scholar, you're a student, or Allahu Musta'an. So this is what we should aspire to. How many of us will become scholars? Maybe none of us. But at the end of the day, if we cannot be scholars, let at least us be students. Let us at least be learning. So you're either the teacher who teaches people Islam, or you're the student who is learning Islam. But don't be from that third category. The one who is neither the teacher nor is he the student. Every one of us needs to be giving time in their day, in their life to learn Islam. And every one of us can do it. Wallah, it's not difficult. And when I say learn Islam, notice the second part of what Ali ibn Abi Talib said, ala sabili najah, on the path to salvation. Because there is a right way to learn Islam and there's a wrong way to learn Islam. Some people learn Islam, but they're on a roundabout. They just keep going around and around and around and around. Like they got stuck on the roundabout. They're not going straight. They're just going around, then they come again. Then around, then they come again. Then around, then they come again. Because they're not studying the right way. They're not learning the right way. They're not going forward. And the other thing we benefit from the statement of Ali ibn Abi Talib is that learning is the Sabilul Najah. It's the way to be safe. It's the way to salvation. Didn't the Prophet ﷺ tell us about the one who sets out on a road, on a path, seeking knowledge thereby? سَهَّلَ اللَّهُ لَهُ بِهِ طَرِيقًا إِلَى الْجَنَّةِ. Allah makes the path to Jannah easy for him. Every one of us has our own ability. Not all of us can study full time. Not all of us can go to another country to study in an institute and come back. But every one of us has to be studying. That's including the teachers also. Because the teachers also have to be studying and learning. Everyone is on that road to salvation. Didn't the Prophet ﷺ, who is the greatest of the ulama al-Rabbaniyin, the scholars who nurtured his students, there's nobody who nurtured his students like the Prophet ﷺ nurtured his students. Didn't he say, or didn't Allah say to him, وَقُلْ رَبِّ زِدْنِي عِلْمًا, Oh Allah, give me more knowledge. So for that, we realize that everyone is on that path to salvation. And that path to salvation comes from learning Islam. Learning Islam and implementing it. Because knowledge for knowledge's sake doesn't benefit you anything. But knowledge that you act upon. And perhaps we'll come to another advice that talks about this. So what is the third person? The third person is the one that Ali ibn Abi Talib says. He calls him Hamajun Ra'a. and he's somebody who is lost and has, like some of the scholars said, la nidama lah. He doesn't have like any system and any way and he doesn't have like he's like a leaf in the wind. He doesn't have a path that he's going on. He's not going anywhere. And he explained this, Ali ibn Abi Talib, by he says that he's following everyone who calls out. Every voice that shouts out, this person follows behind them. And don't we see people like that? We see people in the issues of ikhtilaf, like they go like the wind. Like the 1 minute they do this, 1 minute they do that. Sometimes they're praying, sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're doing well. They're just like a leaf in the wind, following everyone who shouts out. And anyone who shouts to them, come this way, he's behind them. The next person shouts out to them, come this way, he goes with him. He says, no, that way was wrong, come this way, he goes with him. He's following every na'iq, everyone who is shouting and screaming, he's just following behind. يَمِيلُونَ مَعَ كُلِّ رِيحٍ. Every time the wind blows, he moves with the wind. The example of the alim Rabbani, the scholar who is firmly grounded, that scholar is like a rock, like a mountain. The wind blows, he doesn't move. The sea crashes against it, doesn't move. The situation changes, he's solid. His fatawa, his principles. He doesn't leave his principles because something happened, some some small event happened, and he threw all his principles away and started a new set of principles. He stays on very firm. And the student who is learning is trying to copy him. He's trying to copy him. Sometimes he might sway a bit, but he's generally following that scholar and trying to be like them. The third type of person, مَعَ كُلِّ رِيحٍ يَمِيل. He goes left and right. Every time the wind blows, he doesn't have any ability to stay in one place. The wind blows and he goes on that side. The wind blows again and he goes on the other side. Ali ibn Abi Talib said, لَمْ يَسْتَضِيءُوا بِنُورِ الْعِلْمِ. They didn't take the light of knowledge, so they're in the darkness. وَلَمْ يَلْجَأُوا إِلَى رُكْنٍ وَثِيقٍ. And they didn't hold on to something strong. He's still talking about this third category, this one who is like blowing around with the wind. He says this person didn't take a lamp. Because what is your lamp that will take you to Jannah? Imagine that the road is dark and there's a lot of paths going left and right. What is the lantern that you can take with you that will show you the way to Jannah? That is al-ilm. That's knowledge. Or at least you hold on to something solid. You hold on to a scholar. You hold on to that scholar, and that scholar will stop you from getting blown about by the wind. This person didn't have a light of knowledge and he didn't hold on to anything. He continued. He said, العلم خير من المال. العلم يحرسك وأنت تحرس المال. He said knowledge is better than wealth. Because knowledge guards you and you guard wealth. Look at the statement of the ulama. Look at Ali ibn Abi Talib. Look at what he said. He said knowledge is better than wealth. Why? Because what do you do with your wealth? You spend your whole time making sure other people don't steal it. You spend your time protecting it, keeping it safe. What does knowledge do? Knowledge spends its time keeping you safe. Knowledge keeps you safe and guards you. Knowledge is like having a bodyguard. That bodyguard is going to walk with you and be with you your whole life. That's your knowledge. It's your bodyguard. But you have to be the bodyguard for your wealth. You have to guard your wealth and stop people from taking it and stealing it and misusing it and spending it. You have to guard your wealth, but knowledge guards you. He said, العلم يزكو على العمل. Knowledge, it leads you and it increases you until you act upon it. وَالْمَالُ تَنْقُصُهُ النَّفَقَةِ. But every time you spend your wealth, it goes down. Every time you spend your knowledge and you use your knowledge, it goes up. And every time you spend your wealth, it goes down. There are many, so his advice is more than a couple of pages, but if we don't stop there, we'll not get to the next piece of advice. But it's a beautiful piece of advice, and in that book, if you get the whole of that book, Words of Advice from the Salaf by Salim al-Hilali, then inshallah you will inshallah bi'idhnillahi ta'ala be able to read the whole thing. But I just thought I would just take that part. So we took from that Ali ibn Abi Talib said there are three types of people. There is a scholar who is nurturing his students. There is somebody who is learning in the right way, who's heading on the path to Jannah. And there's somebody getting blown about by the wind. He doesn't know where he's going, and every time somebody shouts, he follows him. So you have to choose. You can't choose to be the scholar, because that only comes with knowledge and practice and tawfiq from Allah. But you can choose to be one of the second two. You can choose to be the student, or you can choose to be the one who is getting blown about by the wind. That is your choice. So that is some of the advice of Ali ibn Abi Talib radiyallahu anhu, and his advice is lengthy, subhanAllah. The next piece of advice that is mentioned in the book is the advice of Sufyan al-Thawri rahimahullah ta'ala to Abbad ibn Abbad al-Khawwas. So Sufyan al-Thawri was another major scholar, great Imam of Islam, great scholar of Hadith, Sufyan ibn Sa'id ibn Masruq al-Thawri rahimahullah ta'ala, from the major thiqat, reliable scholars of hadith. He wrote to his contemporary Abbad ibn Abbad al-Khawwas, and we're going to come to the advice of Abbad ibn Abbad in a minute, because he has a beautiful advice himself. And I like the fact that look at how they are exchanging advice. Like Abbad ibn Abbad has his own advice that he gave out, and Sufyan al-Thawri has the advice that he gave to him. So he narrates his advice, and the other advice is narrated in some of the books of the Sunan. Wallahi, I don't know how to start this, because it's really, his advice is really deep, and it's really, it's sometimes the advice is quite sad, and quite like, Sufyan al-Thawri talks extensively about the time he's in. Now bear in mind, Sufyan al-Thawri lives in the time of the ulama, the major scholars, and the time of the golden age of Islam. And listen to what he said. He said, أما بعد فإنك في زمان كان أصحاب النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يتعوذون أن يدركوه. You are living in a time that the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to seek refuge with Allah from being in. وَلَهُمْ مِنَ الْعِلْمِ مَا لَيْسَ لَنَا وَلَهُمْ مِنَ الْقَدَمِ مَا لَيْسَ لَنَا. And they have knowledge that we don't have, and they have precedence that we don't have. فَكَيْفَ بِنَا حِينَ أَدْرَكْنَاهُ عَلَى قِلَّةِ عِلْمٍ وَقِلَّةِ صَبْرٍ. So how are we, when we have come to this time of trials with very little knowledge and very little sabr, وَقِلَّةِ أَعْوَانٍ عَلَى الْخَيْرِ, and very few people who are telling us to, or who are helping us to do good, وَفَسَادٍ مِنَ النَّاسِ, and the people are in a state of corruption, وَكَدَرٍ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا, and they have that obsession with the dunya. The strangest thing is that Sufyan al-Thawri said this in a time when he was surrounded by the people of knowledge, and Islam was in a state of strength and a state of honor and a state of, where this is the time of ilm al-hadith and the time of the scholars of the sunnah. And look what he says. We're in a time that the companions of the Prophet ﷺ used to seek refuge with Allah from being in that time. So how about our time? How would the Sahaba say if they saw our time? Would they not seek refuge with Allah from, if they would seek refuge with Allah from being in the time of Sufyan al-Thawri, then how about the time that we're living in? We talked about this in the Signs of the Hour, that some of the scholars used to say that they were living in the time of, the time of corruption and the time of fasad and the time of, a lack of knowledge. But how about us? How about us? Our situation is much, much, much worse, much stronger. And he says, look at the Sahaba. The Sahaba had knowledge we don't have. And this is a huge scholar of Islam whose name is mentioned in every book of hadith, in books of fiqh, in books of aqidah. Sufyan al-Thawri is an imam from the imam of the Muslims. But look at how he raises the Sahaba. He says they had knowledge we don't have. And they had precedence in the sight of Allah we don't have. So how should we be? How will we behave when we've come to this time and we have so little knowledge and so little sabr and so few people to help us to do good and so much corruption and so much love of the dunya? Wallahi, the reality is that we are in a worse situation, a million times worse situation than what Sufyan al-Thawri is talking about. And we suffer from these things: a lack of knowledge, a lack of sabr, a lack of people to help you to do good, corruption among the people, love of the dunya. Aren't these the basic things that we all suffer from in our lives? We suffer from a lack of knowledge, a lack of sabr. That we complain that there's so few practicing people. You try to practice your religion and people push you away and throw you out. And the corruption that exists, in terms of not corruption as in financial, I mean just corruption in general, corruption in deeds, people doing sins everywhere you look, people preferring the dunya over the religion. So what does Sufyan al-Thawri advise you to do when you reach this time? He said, فَعَلَيْكَ بِالْأَمْرِ الْأَوَّلِ وَالتَّمَسُّكِ بِهِ. He said, hold on firmly to how things were in that time. Stick to the al-amr al-awwal, stick to how things were in the time of the Sahaba. Because all of the good is in their time, right? Everything good was in their time. The knowledge, the sabr, the taqwa, the helping each other for the sake of Allah, the salah, the piety, the love of Allah that they had, everything good was with them. And everything bad came from the people who followed. Like some of the scholars said, al-khayru kullu al-khayr. All of the good exists in that which the early generations followed. And all of the evil exists in that which the later generations innovated. All of the good exists in what the early generations had. So where are you going to find barakah? Where are you going to find khair? Where are you going to find knowledge? From the Sahaba. That's where you're going to find it. Those are the people who are going to give you the benefit. Those are the people who are going to give you the good. Those are the people that if you follow them, your society will return back to how it was in the beginning. Like Imam Malik said, nothing will correct the later part of this ummah except what corrected the earlier part. If you want to correct your society, you can only do it the way the Sahaba did it. If you want to gain knowledge, you can only do it the way the Sahaba did it. If you want to come close to Allah, you can only do it the way the Sahaba did it. So all of the good is in sticking to al-amr al-awwal, how things were in the beginning. وَالتَّمَسُّكْ بِهِ. And sticking, like holding on to it. And then he says something which is, wallahi, it's difficult. He said, وَعَلَيْكَ بِالْخُمُولِ فَإِنَّ هَذَا زَمَنُ الْخُمُولِ. He said, I advise you to be hidden. Because this is a time to be hidden. And don't one of the things he's saying here is that don't raise your head up to be, like a figure in the society. Worship Allah, benefit the people, but don't put your head over the parapet. This has to be taken in the context of the whole of Islam. If you're a person of good and you're advising the people to be good, to a certain extent, that is what it is. But for certain, in Islam we should have a principle that you don't want, and Sufyan al-Thawri, his advice is, it goes about this extensively. Don't be the first person to put yourself forward. And don't be the first person to speak. And don't be the first person to, to raise yourself up. Stay hidden. And when the time comes when Allah puts you in that position, khair inshallah, it will be good for you. But don't rush to that position for yourself. And Sufyan al-Thawri, in this advice, he talks extensively about love of leadership, about people who love to be the one who is in charge and the one who is in authority and the one who is in front of the people. But wallahi, this is not a good characteristic to have in a person. And you should be a person who the first thing you're worried about is what is between you and Allah. And you want to benefit yourself and others, but you don't necessarily want to do that by putting your head up for the world to see. And think about this, especially the young people here today, the shabab, young guys. Think about this in social media. How many young people, and they want to put their video everywhere and get everyone watching them and everyone looking at them. Allah, you're living in a time where being concealed is better than being in front of the people. And if Allah puts you in that position, and Allah Azza wa Jal gives you a way to do it, sometimes what can you do? And you don't have, and you can just do the best you can. But for people to love it and want it and try, let me put myself out there for the world. And even the du'at, wallah, the people who are giving da'wah, one advice I would give to them is, the more you can delay people knowing about you, the better it will be for you. Because once people know about you, your knowledge doesn't go up. Your time for gaining knowledge is that time when nobody knows about you. That is the best time you can gain knowledge. Because you don't have any worry about you're not busy teaching, you're not busy, you have your time ready for study. So the longer you can stay hidden, the better it is. And then when you come out for the people, you'll come with a lot of benefit, and people will take a lot of benefit from you. Unfortunately, the way we are in the West is the first time you learn Surah Al-Fatiha and then you are the Imam and you are everyone puts you in the front. It's difficult. This is how life is, unfortunately, and you do your best with what you can. But you take Sufyan al-Thawri's advice in the best way possible, like the way that he intended it. It's not that you will never ever share good with people or benefit people, but that your aim is not to be the one in the front and the one on top. The Sahaba used to wait for someone else to take the job. If anyone else they could find to take it, they will give it to him. And this has a great benefit for the ikhlas of a person. And then he talks extensively about loving wealth and loving the dunya and loving to be in charge of the people. And subhanAllah, there's a great deal of benefit in that, but I still want to get to some other points of advice. So the next piece of advice is the advice of Abbad ibn Abbad. So remember, Abbad ibn Abbad was the one who Sufyan al-Thawri gave advice to him. And he gave this advice to Ahlul Sunnah. So this is a general advice. It's recorded in Sunan al-Darimi. And it's a beautiful advice. Where do we start with in this? There are so many points of benefit, but I just wanted to take a couple out of there. There's one particular that I think it's really important. Yani. Okay, I think we'll take this bit first of all. After he's given some of his advice, he says, أَفَمَا كَانَ لِلْقُرْآنِ حَمَلَةٌ قَبْلَهُ وَقَبْلَ أَصْحَابِهِ يَعْمَلُونَ بِمُحْكَمِهِ وَيُؤْمِنُونَ بِمُتَشَابِهِ وَكَانُوا مِنْهُ عَلَى مَنَارٍ أَوْضَحَ لِلطَّرِيقِ وَكَانَ الْقُرْآنُ إِمَامًا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وكان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إماما لأصحابه وكان أصحابه أئمة لمن بعدهم. This is a beautiful statement, he says. He talks about the Hamalatul Quran, the people who really carry the message of the Quran. He talks about how they act upon the muhkam of the Quran. So the Quran can be divided into two parts, muhkam and mutashabih. The muhkam are the parts of the Quran that have only one possible interpretation, or the interpretations don't conflict. I mean, it might have 5 or 6 different ways of understanding it, but none of them conflict with each other. The mutashabih is when a part of the Quran can be understood in different ways. Each way would take you in a different direction. If you took it in one way, it would take you there. If you took it in another way, it would take you over there. What do? We act upon what is clear, the muhkam, and we believe in the mutashabih. So we act upon what is clear, and what is unclear, we believe that it comes from Allah, and we understand it in the light of what is clear. How many people today twist the meanings of the Quran, make the Quran what they think, take whatever ruling they feel, they go left and right, take whatever ruling they feel out of it? That's not how we behave towards the Quran. Towards the things which are clear, we act upon them straight away. And the majority of the Quran is clear. Like Allah Azza wa Jalla said, Hunna Ummul Kitab. The majority and the core of the Quran is absolutely clear. But there are some ayat in the Quran, وَأُخَرُ مُتَشَابِهَاتٍ, which they have different ways of understanding them. They're not unclear, but they just have different ways. If you took it one way, it will take you somewhere totally different. If you took it the other way, it will take you a totally different way. So you believe that it's from Allah, and you understand it in light of what has come from the clear verses of the Quran. Those people are upon a light of guidance and the clearest of paths. The Quran was the Imam of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the Imam of his companions, and his companions are the Imams of those who came after them. This, I think, is worth stopping on. The Prophet ﷺ took his knowledge from the revelation that was given to him in the Quran, and he implemented it in the revelation from the Sunnah, because the Sunnah is revelation as well. His companions took the Sunnah and the Quran from him and acted upon it, and they became Imams for us to follow. So we follow the Quran, and we follow the Sunnah, and we follow the Sahaba. That is what the early generations were upon. And one of the things I want you to take from these advices, by the way, look how they all overlap. If you read all of them, I'm only picking bits, but if you read all of them, subhanAllah, you'll see how they overlap each other. Because the belief of the people of the Sunnah goes together like that. And the belief of the different groups and sects and sort of deviant groups, even two of them cannot agree on the same thing. You put two of them in a room, they will disagree. Whereas the people of the Sunnah, you have one of them in the time of Sahaba, one of them 100 years later, one of them 200 years later, one of them 500 years later, one of them 1,000 years later, one of them 1,200 years later. They all say the same thing, because their belief is one. Because where did they take that belief from? From their hawa? No, they took it from the Quran and the Sunnah and the Sahaba. And if someone asks you, what is the right Muslim? What kind of Muslim are you? You give them this answer from Abbad ibn Abbad, that the Imam of the Prophet ﷺ was the Quran, and he was the Imam of his companions, and his companions were our Imams. This is the answer of what kind of Muslim you are. I follow the Quran, I follow the Sunnah, I follow the Sahaba. And this is the ijma' of Ahl Sunnah. The Ahl Sunnah have ijma' on this. Consensus from all of the Imams of the Sunnah, wherever they are in every country, in every place, in every time. They are unanimously agreed that the right kind of Muslim is the Muslim who follows the Quran and the Sunnah and the Sahaba. And the third one is important, because a lot of people follow the first two or claim, like the poet said, كل يدعي وصلا بليلى وليلى لا تقر لهم بذاك. Everyone says that they love Layla, but Layla doesn't agree with them. And you can't just say, I love the Quran, I love the Sunnah. No, you have to show it. قل إن كنتم تحبون الله فاتبعوني. Say, if you really love Allah, then follow me. So the Quran, the Sunnah and the Sahaba. Because a lot of people claim to follow the Quran and the Sunnah, but when you compare them to how the Sahaba believe, their belief is not like Sahaba. So any group that comes up today and says, we are upon the truth, we are the people of the truth, how do we judge them? By the Quran and the Sunnah and the Sahaba. If they follow Quran as it was revealed, they follow the muhkam, what is clear, and they believe in the mutashabih, what is unclear. And they follow the Sunnah as it was revealed. And they follow the Sahaba as they believed and as they acted, then these people are guided. And the evidence for this is in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, فَإِنْ آمَنُوا بِمِثْلِ مَا آمَنْتُمْ بِهِ فَقَدْ اهْتَدَوْا. If they believe as you companions believe, they are guided. If your belief is like the Sahaba, you are guided. If your belief is not like Sahaba, فَإِنَّمَا هُمْ فِي شِقَاقٍ. They are only in disarray, and just believing whatever they want. And then he quotes, in another part of his advice, he quotes that Umar said to Ziyad, do you know what will destroy Islam? He said 3 things. Zallatu alim, the mistakes of a scholar. When a scholar slips up. وَجِدَالُ مُنَافِقٍ بِالْقُرْآنِ, and the munafiq, or the arguing with the munafiq with the Quran. The Quran, munafiq arguing with the Quran, or debating with the Quran. وَأَئِمَّةٌ مُضِلُّونَ, and scholars or imams that misguide the people. And wallahi, these 3 things are worth also stopping on. The mistake of the scholar, or the slip of the scholar, this is a huge trial. When the scholar slips and makes a mistake. Not just a mistake, but a zalla, and he really slips and falls down. Because the people are following them. And so when they slip, everyone behind them slips. And as for the munafiq, and especially this jidal, this argumentation and debate that goes on with people without any knowledge. And the role of the munafiqeen in destroying Islam is something clear from the history of Islam. Especially if you look at what happened after the time of Umar, and how the munafiqeen made their plans and twisted the words of the Quran and the Sunnah until the people became lost and began to fight each other. And then the Imma Mudillun, the scholars and the people who are imams, and they misguide the people. I want to come to a bit of his advice that I think is really important. If I can get to it. Okay. This, for a certain group of people, I mean, wallahi, maybe the people here will not, inshallah, there will not be a group of people among them, but still, this advice for a group of people today is, you feel like he wrote it after he saw the state of the Muslims today. Especially some of the practicing brothers. He said, وَلَا تعيبوا بالبدع تزينا بعيبها فإن فساد أهل البدع ليس بزائد في صلاحكم ولا تعيبوها بغيا على أهلها فإن البغي من فساد أنفسكم. Wallahi, this is like, if there was one thing that I would write it and put it on my status. Really, this is needed in our time. Do not criticize the people of innovation in order to make yourself look good. So the people of innovation, these are the people who have followed the wrong way. They have followed other than the Sunnah. They've gone away from the Sunnah. But there are some people who, in order to make themselves look good, they spend their time, their nights and their days criticizing and making refutations and writing refutations of people. تَزَيُّنًا بِعَيْبِهَا. They want to make themselves look good at the expense of other people. He said, the corruption of the people of innovation doesn't increase you in piety. If your brother is in a state of mistake and he's fallen into an error, that doesn't make you any better. That doesn't give you a better place in Jannah. And do not find fault in them in order to oppress the people. Wow, look at this. Wallah, you would think he's sitting today. Do not find fault in them in order to oppress the people. So some of the people, they find fault in others to oppress them. And the reason they find faults with other people is so that they can, get revenge for what he did to me before, what he said to me before, something like that. Because this oppression is from the corruption of your own self. Then he said, وَلَيْسَ يَنْبَغِي لِلْمُطَبِّبِ أَنْ يُدَاوِي الْمَرْضَى بما يبرئهم ويمرضه فإنه إذا مرض اشتغل بمرضه عن مداواتهم ولكن ينبغي أن يلتمس لنفسه الصحة ليقوى على علاج المرضى. He said, and this is again applicable, very applicable, same piece of advice. He said it's not right for the person who's trying to cure other people to cure them with what will make them better and make him sick. Because if he becomes sick, he will become busy with his sickness instead of curing the people. But it's right for him to seek for himself to be healthy so that he can be strong to help other people. Meaning, if you're doing stuff that's making your heart sick while you're trying to make other people better, you're going to end up like the example of the candle. You give out light, but you yourself melt into nothing. You're helping other people, but you're making yourself sick by helping those people. Rather, what you should do is make yourself and your heart healthy, so that you can be strong to help other people. And then he says, how should you deal with people? How should you deal with the mukhalif? How should you deal with the one who has gone into error, the one who has gone against the sunnah? He said, فَلْيَكُنْ أَمْرُكُمْ فِي مَا تُنْكِرُونَ عَلَىٰ إِخْوَانِكُمْ نَظْرًا مِنْكُمْ لِأَنفُسِكُمْ. He said, let your situation be with those people that you criticize from your brothers as though you were speaking to yourself. The way that you would want to speak to yourself, let it be like that. وَنَصِيحَةً مِنْكُمْ لِرَبِّكُمْ. And part of nasiha to Allah. And it's sincerely for the sake of Allah. If you see a mistake in your brother, of course you're going to correct it. Of course you're going to tell people that it's wrong. But let you do it in a way that it's as if you're talking to yourself and you wish for it, a part of nasiha to Allah. Yani meaning you're getting the ajr from Allah. Not that you want to find fault in him so you look good, or you want to find fault in him in order to get back at him for something that he did, or in order to get some sort of revenge, or in order just to make him look low. But you want to correct the flaws of the people because it's as if you're correcting yourself. You're like a mirror to your brother. You want to correct his mistakes so that he can be better and you can be better. Not so that you look good and he looks bad. Now that doesn't mean, also, we have to be clear here, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't sometimes have to use some harsh words or have to publicly point out somebody's mistake. This is what is well known from the early generations that they used to do. But you have to bear in mind your intention being for Allah, not to criticize people to make yourself look good. He said, وَشَفَقَةً مِنْكُمْ عَلَى إِخْوَانِكُمْ. And be gentle with your brothers. Have shafaqah, and you want them to be guided. When you criticize somebody, you want to criticize them so you look good and they look bad, or you want them to be guided as well? You want them to be guided as well. وَأَن تَكُونُوا مَعَ ذَلِكَ بِعُيُوبِ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَعْنَى بِعُيُوبِ غَيْرِكُمْ. Wallahi, this is beautiful. He said, and let you be, despite that, busy with your own faults instead of the faults of other people. Because wallahi, the one who is busy with the faults of other people, لن يفلح. Take it as a guarantee. If you're busy with the faults of other people, you will never, ever, ever gain success. Until you become busy with your own faults first of all. Does that mean we don't clarify things? No, we still clarify. We still point out errors and mistakes because that's part of nasiha for the people. But we're more worried about our mistakes than other people's mistakes. Some people, wallah, if you ask him what are the mistakes that Fulan made, he will give you a PDF. If you ask him, Ya Akhi, what about your mistakes? He will say, my mistakes? What mistakes? هذا مخالف لعمل السلف. This is against the action of the Salaf, the early generations. They were much more worried about their mistakes than the mistakes of other people. Did that mean they didn't point them out? No, they pointed them out. But if you ask him what about his mistakes, he'll list you, look, he needs to correct this and this and this. If you ask him what about your mistakes, he will list more. Because he's more concerned about himself than he is about other people. And notice he said, مَعَ ذَلِكَ. So he said, don't ignore the first part. You're still going to give him advice. You're still going to clarify. But you're going to be more worried about your own mistakes than you are about other people. Some of the people spend their whole time, day and night. You say, Akhi, what do you do at night? He says, well, I must admit, I don't pray tahajjud. I spend the night watching YouTube to find the mistakes that other people make. Busy yourself with your own mistakes, Akhi. If you busy yourself with your own mistakes, then whatever you see from people's mistakes, clarify them. But the first person you need to worry about is yourself. Otherwise, you're just making yourself sick at the expense of getting other people healthy. So wallahi, every time I read this advice, I just think this is it's so important. Then he also says, it's really important. He says, وَقَدْ قَالَ عُمَرْ ibn al-Khattab رضي الله عنه رحم الله من أهدى إلي عيوبي. Umar ibn al-Khattab said, may Allah have mercy on the one who gives me a gift by telling me my faults. Wallahi, look at the sincerity. Umar is making dua for the one who says, you have a mistake. And this is the other side of the coin. That if someone says, Ya akhi, you have a mistake, Jazahullahu khairan, yani he's doing you a big favor. Would you rather meet Allah with that mistake, or you would rather somebody corrects that mistake for you? So this is the issue of accepting advice and giving advice to people. You give advice, but ya akhi, give what you can take. Don't give something you can't take. So I'm gonna give you nasiha. Then he says, okay akhi, I have some nasiha for you. He says, don't tell me, I don't want to know. La, don't give what you can't take. وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ. What does that mean, وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ? Each of them advises the other. He tells him, Ya akhi, you have some mistakes in this. Jazakallahu khairan. And akhi, you have some in this. Jazakallahu khairan. Umar said it's a hadiyah, ahda ilayya. He gave me a gift by telling me that you have this mistake, so that he could correct it. Because the only thing he was worried about is Allah. But the way you advise people is important. So if you take the whole advice together, which we mentioned from beginning to end, he talks about how to give nasiha, how to take nasiha. Give it in a way that's sincere. Don't give it in a way that's putting the other person down. And take it in a way that's sincere. Don't take it in a way that you get pride and you say, I don't want to listen to what people have to say. You listen to their nasiha and you give both. And if someone brings your faults to light, may Allah have mercy on them. If they do it in the right way, in a nice way. Wallahi, if someone says something bad about you, my first advice to you, wallahi, is, I'm not saying like take it with a smile, but try to think about what they say. Because subhanAllah, sometimes even in what your enemy says, you can find the truth. Like your enemy says something bad about you and you get upset about it, but wallahi, sometimes he says the truth. And sometimes you find in that something that is like, he will say to you what your friends will not say. Your friends are being all nice and polite, they will not tell you what your problems are. But sometimes your enemy will come to you and will just give it to you straight. He doesn't want you to benefit. He wants you to ignore him so that he can get a victory over you. But the best way you get over your enemy is to take his advice and look at it and put it into practice. And don't be sad if somebody says something about you. Of course we don't condone the backbiting and all of these things. It's a different thing. But if it comes to your knowledge that you have a mistake, correct the mistake. Because ultimately, on the day of judgment, you're going to thank the person for bringing it to your attention, because you had a chance to fix it in the dunya as opposed to akhirah. But again, the way you bring it to that person's attention, that's everything. If you give good advice in a good way with sincerity, as if you care and you're concerned and you want the person to be better, what did he say? He said that your place in Jannah doesn't get bigger by your brother going to Jahannam. But if you help your brother to go to Jannah by the permission of Allah, your place gets bigger and his place gets bigger. You both win. But if he goes to Jahannam, you don't win anything. You don't get a bigger place. Not like you get his house and you get his land in Jannah and you get everything. No, you don't get anything. So you want people to be guided, you want people to be better, you want people to change. You try to give sincere advice. Wallahi, I really found this, I found it to be something, subhanAllah, very beneficial for me, and I tried always to bear this advice in mind when I criticize somebody or when someone criticizes me. So when someone criticizes me, I try not to get upset about it. And I try to take it and listen to it and look through it, even if they're not very nice about it. Sometimes it's funny, like I remember one time, I did a khutbah. I did a khutbah on ad-deen al-nasiha. The religion is good advice. So one brother came to me after the khutbah, he said, brother, I want to give you advice. I thought, mashallah, and I gave the khutbah and he listened and now he's going to give me advice. I said, excellent bro, tfaddal. He said, I hated your khutbah. I hated it. I said, Jazakallahu khairan. Like, what can I say? Like, if you gave me some points, like you spoke too fast, or you didn't give enough proof, or you weren't on the topic, or something. But he just told me he hated it. Yani. So the point is that sometimes the advice can be a bit bitter, like, you're like, okay, Jazakallah khairan, I really appreciate your advice, but no, make it practical, and give somebody, like, don't say to them, I hated your khutbah, but say to them, like, why don't you put this, why don't you do this? But take that advice from people, and be willing to take what you give, right? So I think this is a beautiful piece of advice. There's so many more parts, but we don't have much time. I don't think that we have enough time to go through the other parts of advice, subhanAllah. But I think, wallahi, if you were to get this book, it's translated into English. Not all of the advice I've mentioned is in it, but some of it, you would really appreciate it. And I think that all of us can benefit from reading these words of advice of the scholars. There is another book by Sheikh Abdul Razzaq Al-Abbad, Hafidhahullah. The Sheikh wrote a book called From the Advice of the Salaf to the Young People. So this is like specific advice for the young people. But there's beautiful books. Even if you go to a good, reliable bookstore, you'll find more than one book that deals with the topic of just advice that people give to other people. And if you compile it together, it's like words of wisdom. And some of the non-Muslims do this. They gather together like words of wisdom from, famous people and put it in books and things. SubhanAllah, think about this. In Islam, we have books that are like words of wisdom that have been gathered from pearls of wisdom that have been gathered from great scholars, Sahaba, just little pieces of advice. And above that and beyond that, the advice the Prophet ﷺ gave to his Sahaba. Like the little words of advice. Like when the Prophet ﷺ said to Ibn Abbas, "Ihfadillah yahfadik." Guard the rights of Allah and the religion of Allah, and Allah will guard you. This hadith, these words of advice. "Ihris ala ma yanfa'uk. وَاسْتَعِنْ بِاللَّهِ وَلَا تَعْجَزْ." Do what will benefit you and seek the help of Allah, and don't be defeatist. Don't say I can't do it. And these are like just these little hadith of advice and words of advice. And then you share this advice with others. You share it with your children. Wallahi, giving advice to people, it's a beautiful thing. So I just wanted to share with you that such things exist, because I thought maybe some of you are not even aware that this material exists that you can benefit from. And even in English, much of it has been translated. And if someone were to do even more, there is an opportunity for more work on this, to gather like a book of advice from the early generations of Islam and the great scholars of Islam, and to compile books of advice that you can give to young people, that you can give to your family, you can pass on to people. Allah, there is some amazing words of advice in there, but it's very deep. It's not like, we only managed to get through a few sentences, and there's pages and pages and pages, because it's the advice they gave. They spoke little, but when they spoke, their words meant a lot. They were weighty words, heavy words. So I would recommend everyone to take a little bit of time to read some of the words of advice that the scholars gave to their students, that the Sahaba gave to the Tabi'een, and so on, so that you can benefit from this in your life, and you can also benefit the other people around you with this, and also to encourage each other to give each other words of advice. Just generally to be people who give advice to each other. And the greatest advice, and the advice that Allah Azza wa Jal gives to you in the Quran more than anything else, ittaqullah. Have taqwa of Allah. Protect yourself from Allah's punishment, because it just keeps coming again and again. Ittaqullah. Protect yourselves from Allah's punishment by doing all that is good, keeping away from what is bad, keeping to the limits of Allah. So just generally, like being people who give advice to their friends, to their family, to just share words of little quotes, words of advice. And I also think this is important when it comes to things like social media, because we love sharing things on social media now, right? Like we share and most of the stuff people share is not authentic and not reliable. Wallah, if you were to take this book that I recommended, or some other words of advice, books of advice, and just take like a line from it each time and just share it with people, wallah, benefit so much. People will benefit from it, sharing advice to the general Muslims. So this is just a topic that I wanted to cover, and we had a spare Friday, and I thought, let's talk about some of the advice of the scholars and just encourage people to read more about it and to study more on that topic. Okay. In Friday nights, usually we have been giving people a chance to ask questions. For the sisters, if you could write it down and send it with some of the children, inshallah, or one of the children. And for the brothers, you can just, on topic, off topic, I don't mind. Whatever it is, inshallah. Yes, Habibi.
We heard today that our concern should be more towards the akhirah rather than worldly affairs. So, what is your advice on the topic like when we work in office environment? Should we look for what one there to for the worldly affairs, or should we try to put in more time and make excel in the environment?
That's a beautiful question. So, the question, I'll repeat it and I might just paraphrase a little bit. We talked about preferring the deen over the dunya. When you work in an office environment, you often have a choice between working, like giving your 100% energy, to that environment and getting promotions and getting further, maybe getting more money, and holding off and just doing the bare minimum. Which should we do? And I think the answer to that is that there isn't one answer to that, but that you should be flexible enough to know when to push and when to sit back. If you spend your whole life pushing for the next promotion and the next promotion, wallah, you're going to lose your deen, because you will not have time for your religion. But there is a time for this and a time for that. In the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, he said, وَلَكِنْ يَا حَنْظَلَ سَاعَةٌ وَسَاعَةٌ. But O Hanzala, there is a time for this and a time for that. So there are certain times in your career where you're going to stick to your prayers, your reading of Quran, but you're going to put more energy into your career at that time, maybe a month, maybe 2 months. You're putting that energy in to gain a particular benefit. But then you're going to have times where you can lay back a little bit and give more to the deen. So I think the answer is not that you always lay back and just do the minimum, but go for productivity and get the most out of each situation. Meaning that there are certain times where you can work smart rather than working hard. You sort of say, okay, if I put more energy in this, but I just hold off on that part, I will get, inshallah, some benefit in the dunya, but I'll have time for my deen. But the question is, why are you working hard? If you are working hard in your office for the religion, by means of I need to feed my family, and I want to be able to give sadaqah and zakah, this is also part of the deen. So you can also, say that sometimes when you work hard for something in the dunya, and your intention is to please Allah, you can also get some rewards in that. But it shouldn't be the case that you're just a work person, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, that's the only thing on your mind. No. Even when you work hard, your goal or your reason why you work hard should be the deen. So I'm going to work hard because if I get this promotion, I get more time off and I can use that time to study. So even you're working hard, your intention behind it is the deen. But it comes back to that hadith, ihris ala ma yanfa'uk. Do what will benefit you. Look for the benefit. Is this job better for you than this job? Okay, go for this job. Is it better for you if you move here, do this, study here, work there? Go for what will benefit you and adjust your time. But make sure that you have time for your religion and time for your work, and make sure that whatever you do for your work, your ultimate goal is your religion. So the dunya should be your servant, not your master. The dunya should be your servant. Meaning the dunya is like a servant, like a worker, like a maid that serves you. It should be bringing you things to help you in your deen. But when the dunya is your master, what happened? Now you are the one who is running behind the dunya. You are running behind it, giving, trying to give everything for it. Whereas it should be the one running behind you. Your dunya should serve your religion, not you are serving the dunya. And Allah knows best. Did anyone else have a question? From Abbad ibn Abbad al-Khawas. And it's in Sunan al-Darimi. I believe, if I'm not mistaken. It may be in other places, but where I remember it from, it's in Sunan al-Darimi, rahimahullah. And it's extensive. I didn't even quote the whole, I just quoted a piece of it. It's very, very, very extensive piece of advice.
So the advice that you would say to the companions and the Imams of us, and then we continue
It's
to do the same advice?
more than that. I was taking only a piece from here and then 4 or 5 paragraphs down, a piece from there, instead of, because the whole thing was, it's like 3-4 pages long. It's a big piece of advice from Abbad ibn Abbad. He was a companion, or he was a what's the word? He was in the same time as contemporary. That's the word I was looking for, of Sufyan al-Thawri, rahimahullah ta'ala.
So you're living in a society which is being corrupted, and then you're learning about it. So you can improve the society with what you have. But do you want to be the leader? Like, do you have to be the leader?
Okay, this is a really good question. In fact, that's a very perceptive question. You're living in a corrupt society, and you are learning Islam and practicing Islam. At that point, should you want to be the leader? Should you take a position of leadership? It doesn't have to be general leadership. I'm not talking about being the president or whatever. Should you want to be, to take more and more authority or not? There are 2 answers to that question. But I would say as a general answer, no. As a general answer, you should work on correcting from the ground up. Because Ahlul Sunnah have a principle that we correct our society from the ground up, not from the top down. Whereas some of Ahlul Bid'ah, their principle is you correct from the top down. Meaning that, get rid of the guy at the top and then everything will work out. But that's not the Sunnah of Allah, it doesn't work. Instead, what the Prophet ﷺ did is to correct from the ground up, meaning yourself, your family, your society. And what will happen? As you correct more and more people, some of those people will become in positions of leadership. And then they will correct more people, and then some of them, and eventually it will filter upwards. It will filter upwards. However, when you try to change what is at the top and filter down, you cause more corruption than you fix, like Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah said. And this causes killing and fighting and civil war and all of these things by trying to change what is at the top instead of trying to change what is at the bottom. Ahlul Sunnah say we change what is at the bottom. However, if you are offered a position of authority, could be like, for example, a position of something local, imam of a masjid, or a position of, to be a manager of something or responsible for a project, and you believe you are the best person to do it genuinely, then you can. And the evidence for this is the statement of Yusuf, when he said to the king of Egypt, make me in charge of the khaza'in. Make me in charge of the stores of grain in Egypt. He knew he was the best person for it, so you can seek it if you are the best person for it. But generally, loving to be in charge is a sign of corruption. It's a sign you're not the right person. The best person to be in charge is the one who doesn't want to be. And anyone who craves for it is the wrong person to do it, generally. If you crave for it, you're not the right person to do it. So what we would say is the general principle is ground up, not top down. But if you see you get a position to do something in your society and you see you are the best person genuinely for it, there is no harm for you to take it, inshallah.
What's the evidence for this ground up? Because a lot of people the top down.
So the evidence for the ground up, the most clear, there are 2 types of evidence. There is the evidence that forbids us from the top-down approach. So for example, the evidence, and this is mutawatir in the hadith, of obedience to the ruler, even if he is from the worst of the people. That is the first thing. And the second is the seerah and the action of the Prophet ﷺ, that he never ever did top-down, always ground up. In Makkah, he had a chance to be the ruler of Makkah, and he rejected it in favor of correcting what was along the ground. So broadly, it's a long topic, but broadly there are 2 evidences. There are ahadith that forbid us from the top-down approach, And there is the seerah which encourages us from the bottom up approach of correcting yourself. And then there is the issue of ijma', because as Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah said, there is ijma' on this issue which came in the time of the tabi'een and those after them, that there is ijma' on this issue, a consensus that you cannot take a top-down approach, but you have to take a bottom-up approach with the fiqh that involves. There is fiqh in that. It's not like you can't take that to, there has to be some rules and regulations in it. But generally we would say something like this. So for the sisters' questions very quickly. How do we change kids for their interest in knowledge? I'm going to try and answer quickly, so we don't take too much of your time. I know it's late, inshallah. So how do we get our kids interested in knowledge? Make knowledge exciting and relevant. I.e., don't make it boring and irrelevant. So knowledge that is boring, like where you just, boring the kids and they just like, they don't feel interested. And also knowledge which is not relevant to them. They listen to it, they don't feel like it matters to them. So I think you have to make knowledge exciting for them, especially at the beginning. The boring stuff you have to do, right? But you kind of do it later on after you've got their interest in it. Make it exciting and make it relevant. And let them know the value of it. If you don't know the value of something, why would you do it? If you know it's your quickest way to Jannah, you're willing to suffer for it. So those would be some pieces of advice. And that's a long topic also. There was a point you said, that Umar said one of the things that will destroy Islam is al-jidal. Can you explain or elaborate on the topic of al-jidal? So jidal is argumentation. And what Umar mentioned is jidalu munafiqin bil-Qur'an. This has possibly two ways of understanding it. One is the danger of the munafiqeen and what they do and how they corrupt the society. The munafiq is the one who keeps disbelief on the inside and shows belief on the outside. And if you look at the seerah and what they did in the time of Uthman, when they turned the people against Uthman, and then they turned the people against Ali bin Abi Talib, and all of the things that happened and the killing that happened because of the actions of Abdullah ibn Saba and the munafiqeen, and what they did to harm Islam through their putting false pretenses, false things across through the Qur'an. So for example, misquoting the Qur'an in a way that confuses people and leads people to a different issue. The other issue is the issue of al-jidal bil-Qur'an generally. Like, people arguing with one another without knowledge and using the Qur'an. Like arguing about ayat and fighting over ayat and things like that. So to me, both of these can be included in this statement of Umar radiallahu anhu. Does reading books about science and psychology for the sake of, sort of tafakkur, and getting, just gaining knowledge and things like that, does it benefit the believer, and should you make time for it? There is a benefit in the knowledge of the dunya, but the benefit is very small in comparison to the knowledge of the akhirah. So what I would advise is, first of all, that you don't make this your main source of knowledge. Because if you spend all your time reading books about, about the sciences of the dunya, what's going to happen is you're not going to get any time for what's more beneficial. And the shaitan makes you busy bil-mafduli anil fadil, with the thing which is less beneficial instead of the thing which is more beneficial. However, if there's a certain benefit to be had in that you want, not just generally you want to just become, more well-read or something like that, but you have a specific benefit. I want to know how to deal with X, Y, Z, addictions among my children. My children have addictions. I want to deal with addictions, and I want to read a book on how to deal with addictions. La bas. There's no harm in it. But as for just, I read like 5 books a week on the topic of sciences and history and whatever, just for the sake of a tafakkur, and just getting a bit more knowledge. No, like busy yourself with the religion, inshallah. But there is no harm in reading some books about the dunya where you have a specific need and a specific intention. But don't be like the non-Muslims. يَعْلَمُونَ ظَاهِرًا مِنَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَهُمْ عَنِ الْآخِرَةِ هُمْ غَافِلُونَ. They know the apparent nature of the world, but they don't know anything about the akhirah. Be people who know a lot about the akhirah, and you just dip into the dunya what you need. The dunya is like using, like some of the people give the example of the toilet. The dunya is like, your use of the dunya is like your use of the toilet. You go in, you do what you need, you come out. You don't it's not like you love to spend time in there and you spend as long as you possibly can, and you just go do what you need to do and you come out. That's what the dunya is like. The books about the dunya, dip into them what you need and then go. But don't spend weeks and weeks and every week I finish all this, I read about the dunya and the dunya. Give a little time for it where you need it. How do you make yourself steadfast in seeking knowledge when the factors affecting is things like health, sicknesses, unable to complete anything due to health issues and feeling incomplete and sad for not being able to complete things? Wallahi, my advice is this: take knowledge in very small doses. Sometimes the problem is we try to take too much knowledge. Like we say, I'm trying to memorize Quran. I'm going to memorize Quran. Now for someone who has already done 5, 6, 7, 8 juz, that's a good goal. But somebody who hasn't memorized anything more than 10 surahs, he says, I'm going to memorize, I still didn't memorize Quran, still didn't memorize Quran, still didn't memorize Quran. You get down about it. But if you said to yourself, I'm going to learn, I know 10 surahs, I'm going to know 10 more. Maybe after 1 month, you will know 10 more. Now inshallah I'm going to go for half of Juz Amma. Now you got half of Juz Amma. Now I'm going to go to memorize Juz. You're setting yourself achievable goals. Sometimes, especially when someone is sick, you're looking at the person is healthy, you're comparing yourself to them. You're saying this person studies 5 classes a week and memorizes books and memorizes Quran, and I'm sick. If you're sick, just do what you can. Small goals. I'm going to learn 1 hadith in a day. I'm going to learn 1 hadith in a week even. I'm going to read 1 page of the Quran every day. Small goals. Set yourself small, easy goals. Make it winnable. Now that's one of the things in the dunya, and sciences of the dunya, psychologists say, which I found it to be something which agrees with Islam. I'm not quoting it because psychologists quote it, but I find it to be something that agrees with Islam. Make it winnable. Meaning, don't give yourself a task you can't win. Because if you do that, subhanAllah, you become demotivated and sad, and you feel like you can't achieve anything because you set yourself a goal that you can't achieve. I'm going to finish the Quran in 3 months. There's a fine line between having high aspirations and setting yourself a goal that you can't do. Make it small, achievable goals. How did Sahaba used to memorize Quran? 10 ayat at a time. Finish 10 ayat, go to the next 10. Finish 10, go to the next 10. Did you ever see the Sahaba saying, I'm trying to finish whole Quran, I'm trying to do it in... No, for them it was just 10 ayat at a time. I'm not going to think about the next 10 till I've done this 10. When I've done this 10, I'm going to think about the next 10. When I've done the next 10, I'm going to think about the next 10. That's how the Sahaba used to think about the Quran. Sufyan al-Thawri, his mother sent him to learn hadith. She said, oh my son, go and learn 10 hadith. If you see these 10 hadith change you, go learn 10 more. That's how the scholars learned. Sufyan memorized thousands of hadith. And Imam Ahmad said he memorized alf hadith, 1,000,000 hadith. Did he memorize 1,000,000 hadith by saying, I'm going to memorize 1,000,000 hadith? No, Allah. 10 by 10. I'm going to memorize 10 hadith. If I memorize this 10, I will memorize 10 more. I'm going to memorize this 10 if I will memorize 10. And like this, and he reached 1,000,000 hadith. Alf hadith, 1,000,000 hadith. There are 1,000,000 hadith by the riwayat in it, by all the different, because every time a different Sahabi narrates the hadith, then the hadith from a different chain is a different hadith. With all of the chains of narration and with the weak hadith and authentic hadith, yes, there are many hadith. Inshallah ta'ala. But you can see like how the scholars, how the scholars memorized. But they didn't start by aiming for 1,000,000 hadith. They started by aiming for 10, just basics. So I think this is my advice. Iman increases and decreases. Is it possible to increase without failure? No, it's not possible to increase without your Iman sometimes decreasing. Because every time you sin, your Iman decreases. And every one of us sins. However, you want the general trend to be upwards. The general trend. Meaning, on a day-to-day basis, it might go up and down and up and down and up and down. But you would like it that as you see your life progressing, in general, the trend is upwards. You'll have some times when you dip, but generally the trend is upwards. That's how I would answer that. You will not stop having dips, but you want to try to make the dips less and less frequent and less bad, not as severe. And generally you want, the trend to be that every day is a bit better than the previous day, and you raised your Iman a little bit more than the previous day. Allah knows best. We take one more from the brothers, then we're going to finish, inshallah. Now.
So you have to debate in class about science and religion. So is it okay if I use the ayat in the Quran unintentionally confuse others?
Okay, so debate about science and religion and using the ayat. First of all, we have to understand. I asked this question to some of the shuyukh. I remember asking Sheikh Abdul Razak al-Badr about something similar. And Sheikh Saleh Sindi, I think I asked a number of mashayikh about this. And the conclusion of what they said, like to summarize it all up, is like this. The Quran contains logical proofs, but they are not purely logical. When we say that, they do not rely upon logic alone. They are what we call adillatun aqliyatun shar'iyyah. They are logical Islamic proofs, meaning that they have an aspect which is shar'i, like an Islamic religious aspect, and they have an aspect which appeals to people's logic. They are not purely logic alone. So don't debate people on logic alone. Okay? Meaning that I'm going to prove to you that God exists by logic. No. By revelation, that is logical. Call it logical revelation if you want to. Adillatun aqliyatun shar'iyyah. Logical revelation. Any revelation which appeals to people's logic. Am khuliqu min ghayri shay'in am humul khaliqun. Were they created from nothing, or did they create themselves? Am khalaqu as-samawati wal ard, or did they create the heavens and the earth? What did Allah say? Bal la yuqinun. They are not certain. They are not sure. You go and speak to the professor of evolutionary microbiology. Bal la yuqinun. They are not certain. They have no yaqeen. They have only dhann, like just they guess. Inhum illa yadhunnun. They just guess. They do not have certainty. Were they created from nothing? Or did they create themselves? Or did they create the heavens and the earth? They're not certain. So this is dalilun aqliyun shar'i. It's a shar'i religious dalil, but it appeals to people's logic. Pure logic and philosophy it's not shar'i, it didn't come from Allah. So you restrict yourself to the logical proofs which Allah put forward and His Prophet ﷺ put forward, instead of your own logic and stuff like that. Second thing is, don't use the Quran for something that Allah did not intend from it. So sometimes what people do with science and the Quran, they take an ayah, they twist the ayah outside of all of its interpretation so that it can agree with science. This brings us back to the first point, because there's another aspect to the first point, which is, don't make your criteria of judgment between right and wrong something in logic. Because if you make logic the criteria between right and wrong, you'll always lose the argument. You cannot win an argument. If you say, right, for example, science is the judge of who's right and wrong. So what are you going to do by the fact that science has this belief in evolution, generally, for the vast majority of scientists, have a belief in evolution, and Islam says it doesn't exist. So how can you reconcile? You can't make science the judge of what is right and wrong. Well, the judge of what is right and wrong is the Shara, is the revelation of Allah Azza wa Jal. That is the judge of what is right and wrong. Science is dhan only. It's just guessing. And it's a theory, and the theory might be right and the theory might be wrong. And like you hear scientists, if you look at science throughout the age, you'll see how many times they decided something and they said it's guaranteed to be true, and then the next day they came and said, no, actually it's not. And there was a time when scientists were unanimous that the earth is flat and you're going to fall off the side if you travel too far west or too far east. Then they said, anyone who says it's round is an ignorant fool. And now they say it's round, and anyone who says it's flat is a... And look, these people change their beliefs on things daily. And my favorite example is what you should eat. If you eat fat, you'll get fat. No, it's not true. If you eat sugar, you'll get fat. No, it's not true. Wallahi, they change their opinions on it. You cannot make this the criteria between right and wrong. The Sharia is yaqeen. That is what tells you the difference between right and wrong. So you can use logical proofs, but in the framework of the Sharia. As I said, don't use the ayat for what they were not revealed for. So some people, they say, I'm going to give you a proof that the scientific theory of the Big Bang is the truth because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they start using an ayah for something that none of the scholars of tafsir ever said this ayah refers to. So they use the ayah for something that nobody from the Salaf said was true. This is an evil thing because it's using the ayah for something that Allah Azza wa Jal did not reveal it for. And yes, you might win your argument, but tomorrow they'll come and say, we've proven that it's not true. This actually science, we don't think this is true anymore. But where is your ayah now? You said the ayah is a proof for it, and the ayah is a guarantee, and so on and so forth. So how should we say? We say, for example, Allah said that the heavens and earth were one. فَفَتَكْنَاهُمَا. So we caused them to split apart. That is what happened. If that means the Big Bang, that's what the Big Bang is. If that doesn't mean the Big Bang, then something else is true. But the ayah itself is true. That the heavens and the earth were one thing, and then they were, they were forced apart. That is true because that's what Allah said. But when you say that Allah said that the Big Bang is true, the mushkila. Because now you have equated the ayah with a scientific theory that may be partially true or completely true or not true at all. And you've made the ayah guaranteed that the ayah now equals this. This is a musibah, big problem. And ultimately you will lose the argument. And I was talking to a brother he has a degree in the sciences, and he's very interested in this. And he also said the same thing. You'll win the debate with a jahil, but if you debate a scientist who really knows his stuff, he'll rip you apart when you start to do this. He'll destroy you from beginning to end when you start to equate ayat to scientific theories. Say what the ayah says, and then let the scientist do what he wants. مَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيُؤْمِنْ وَمَنْ شَاءَ فَلْيَكْفُرْ. You want to believe, believe. You want to disbelieve, disbelieve. You're going to take your belief or your disbelief to your grave. It's not my problem then. So don't equate it too closely, and especially when they come up with things that are so ajib, and they say this is what the ayah means. We say, who said it? Which of the scholars of tafsir? So this is also important, that when you talk about science, tell what the ayah says, but don't jump to where the ayah, something that the ayah didn't say. Just say what the ayah says, and let the scientists draw their own conclusion out of it for the truth or for the otherwise, whatever they want to do. And also in this topic of when you have these things about science and logic and religion, put your focus upon what Islam tells you to put your focus upon, which is Tawheed, the worship of Allah alone. And try not to get bogged down in discussions about things that have no real benefit, right? You're going to just end up back and forward like a ping pong ball. Like people will say, I want to talk about whether or not salty water and seawater mix, whether salty water and fresh water mix. Say, Habibi, if it mixes or it doesn't mix, there is one God and you only worship Him. Wallah, like I don't see like, say, no, I want to debate whether the sun goes around the earth or the earth goes around the sun. Ya Habibi, if the earth goes around the sun, it goes around by the qadr of Allah. If the sun goes around the earth, it goes around by the qadr of Allah. In any case, as Allah said, that's how it is. But what matters is worshipping Allah alone, believing in Allah's revelation. You get caught in these points, wallah, you can drown in them. Like forever you're talking to the person about this and they never ever take Islam because they never got what matters in Islam. And instead you start talking about masail that you don't know what the right answer is and they don't know what the right answer is. And so it's the blind leading the blind. So these are some points that I have about these topics, a bit dangerous. You have to be careful with them. Don't get me wrong, I love the way that Islam is compatible with science. And I mashallah, like I really appreciate it, and I appreciate the Muslims who study science and benefit the ummah with it. But science is not my criteria of what is right and wrong. My criteria is revelation, and science is dhann. It's just a best guess. Sometimes we are right, and sometimes we are wrong. And Allah knows best. Alright, I've kept you guys for a long time. Allah. We actually should have, we would normally make the class after Maghrib, but we only have like maybe 2 classes left, so after Isha, after that Ramadan will come. So I think we only have maybe 1 or 2 classes after this, because we also have a seminar, I think, on one Friday. So probably on that day when there's a seminar, probably will not be a Friday night class. So that's what Allah made easy, and Allah Azza wa Jalla knows best. Salatu wassalam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.